Get ready for Benjamin Knight Fuchs live here on a Sunday early evening. Ben, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Liam. Good to see you. Happy to be here for another Sunday episode.
Sunday episode. It's a
Sunday
great way. It's a great way to end the week. I learned so much on these podcasts. It's just crazy. Yeah.
All right. Well, there's a lot to be said here. I've been studying health and nutrition and biology and biochemistry for 40 years, with a special emphasis on the skin. But because I love biochemistry so much and I love chemistry so much, it really lends itself to understanding how the body works, how the body doesn't work when it comes to chronic degenerative diseases. As I've said so many times, say it again, all disease is cell disease, but all cell disease is preceded by dirty blood. Today, we're going to talk about Parkinson's disease.
Okay.
Parkinson's disease, like any other chronic degenerative disease, is a blood condition. A couple little factoids about it. Some 90,000 people are going to be diagnosed with Parkinson's disease in the United States this year. That's up from 60,000 people, I think, 10 years ago. So the rates are increased. That is a 50% increase. It is a vascular issue, although it doesn't get treated as such. There's nothing doctors can do. The best medical strategies for Parkinson's disease involve giving either analogs of the neurotransmitter dopamine, or I should say precursors of the neurotransmitter dopamine, which we'll talk about here in a second, or what they call dopamine agonists. These are chemicals or drugs that act like dopamine or act at the receptor level like dopamine. That's the best they can do. But because neurotransmitters, like hormones, are supposed to fluctuate, it's really not a great strategy to just give drugs that are supposed to mimic or imitate these natural neurotransmitters. There's also a long-term toxicity that can be associated with some of these drugs.
Sure.
So it's really not a great strategy, and especially considering that it's a vascular condition. There's other ways that you can deal with Parkinson's disease, like you can deal with all chronic degenerative diseases. Put up the first slide, please. This is an article from the International Journal of Molecular Sciences, and if you want to know about, if you want some research proof about everything I talk about when it comes to vascularity in the blood system and dirty blood and chronic degenerative diseases, it's all spelled out right here in this article. This is from, this came out in 2024. This came out this year. Quote, where's the quote here? The pivotal role of the vascular system in maintaining tissue homeostasis is highlighted as it serves as the conduit for oxygen, nutrients, and immune cells to vital organs and tissues due to the vital role of the vascular system, that is the blood, in maintaining homeostasis. Its dysfunction, characterized by impaired blood flow and vascular inflammation, quote, this is it right here, folks, emerges as a common denominator of degenerative diseases across multiple systems. I've been saying this for years, and you don't need a study. You don't need an article. You don't need research to show it. It's logical. The blood is delivering oxygen. The blood is delivering nutrients. The blood is delivering immune cells. The blood is detoxifying the tissues. So obviously, you got a blood problem, you're going to have a tissue problem and an organ problem. So this is that's from the International Journal of Molecular Sciences. Next slide, please, Liam. As far as Parkinson's disease goes, Parkinson's disease involves a brain chemical called dopamine. Dopamine is very important for motor activity, for movements. Body movements just need a puff of dopamine to get started. This is a study that was done on mice that suggests that a burst of dopamine levels at the beginning of movement, as opposed to all the time, is what gets us going. Dopamine gets you going. In fact, the tremors that are associated with Parkinson's disease are really a sign that you're not able to complete a movement. Dopamine is important for getting you to move, to open the door, to lift up a glass, to do different things. All things we take for granted in terms of motor control require this hormone dopamine. Parkinson's disease is marked by deterioration in a part of the brain called the substantia nigra, which means the black substance. I'll tell you why it's black here in a second. It's kind of cool. This black substance is where dopamine is produced. When that area deteriorates, we'll tell you why it deteriorates here in a moment, but basically it's toxicity, blood toxicity. You don't make dopamine. Now, I find the substantia nigra to be very fascinating because it is black. Nigra means black. You know what makes it black? Melanin, skin pigment. Although it's not just skin pigment, but melanin in your skin is also, there's also melanin in your brain. There's melanin in that part of the brain. And the reason I find this interesting is because we don't often associate melanin with being an internal pigment that's found inside the body. And this is why melanoma can happen inside the body. In fact, Jimmy Carter famously had melanoma in the brain. And people, when they think of melanoma, oftentimes think of it as a skin condition. It's actually a cancer that that can show up in the skin, obviously, because you got a lot of melanin in the skin and melanocytes in the skin, but you also have in the brain. So I think that's very fascinating. Melanin is an electrical dampening substance. It sucks up random electrical energy. So it kind of makes sense that an electrical system like the brain would be a home for this very fascinating pigment. You know, you can make computer chips out of melanin. The pigment melanin actually lends itself to the production of information processors by virtue of its ability to dampen and modulate electronic energy. Next slide. This is really important. I'm sorry, is that the next slide? Let me see here. I'm not sure why I don't have that. Oh, okay, here it is. This is really important. I have been saying this for years, that digestive system involvement, first of all, it's involved in all chronic degenerative disease because this is how blood becomes dirty. The intestine is proximal to the circulatory system, and food or nutrients from food go into the bloodstream through the intestine. When you start to get permeability issues, that is leaky issues at the level of the intestine, things get into the bloodstream, and that's where toxicity arises from. This is true about all chronic degenerative diseases. No surprise. It's true about Parkinson's disease as well. Why is this important? Because if you go to a neurologist, you're going to be treated for a brain condition. But because there's nothing you could do for the brain condition, because the brain condition is secondary to the blood, nobody gets results from Parkinson's treatments except for perhaps some symptomatic relief. The problem is at the level of the gut, no surprise. Growing evidence suggests an increasing significance of the extent of gastrointestinal tract dysfunction in Parkinson's disease. Most patients suffer from gastrointestinal tract symptoms, including problems swallowing and bloating and nausea and vomiting, gastroparesis and constipation. Interestingly, constipation symptoms can show up 10 years before Parkinson's symptoms. So if you're dealing with chronic constipation, you should know that that can be a red flag, or it can raise your risks for Parkinson's disease down the road. Of course, it's not really the constipation that's the problem, although that may be a source of the problem because toxicity tends to build up when you're not eliminating things. But really the source of the constipation, which usually involves dysbiosis, and we're going to talk about here in a minute, messed up gut bacteria. Next slide here. Gut-derived sterile inflammation and Parkinson's disease. This is from Frontiers in Neurology, March 2022. Epidemiological and preclinical evidence support a role for gut-derived sterile inflammation. Pro-inflammatory bacteria are overrepresented in Parkinson's disease in the Parkinson's disease gut microbiome. There is evidence for a decreased gut barrier function. That's what I'm talking about, folks. That's called leaky gut. And leak of bacterial antigen across the gut epithelium. This is what I'm saying. Bacterial particles, literally, parts of the bacteria can get into the bloodstream. Secretions from the bacteria can get into the bloodstream when you're dealing with a leaky gut. And systemic exposure to bacterial endotoxin, LPS. LPS is an actual part of the bacteria that is associated with all chronic degenerative diseases. The only reason I'm showing you guys all of these slides is because I've been talking about this for decades, since pharmacy school, really, for almost 4 decades. And I always get the feeling that when I talk about the relationship between the gut and food and diet and chronic degenerative diseases, that people think it's just Ben doing his one-trick pony kind of thing where, oh, everything's digestion, everything's food, everything's the gut. No, this is hardcore science, people. And not only do you, like I said earlier, you don't need research. It's just logical. But there's tons of research that substantiates everything I'm talking about here when I talk about the triangle, which I'll show you here in a second, but especially when it comes to leaky gut, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or SIBO, as they call it, or dysbiosis, messed up gut bacteria, blood toxicity, inflammation, and inflammatory health challenges like brain inflammatory issues like Parkinson's disease. Next slide. There's a very interesting protein called alpha-synuclein, which tends to accumulate in the brains of Parkinson's patients. And no surprise, alpha-synuclein is a gastrointestinal, it's an intestinal protein. It's made in the intestine. And it turns out that this alpha-synuclein in the intestine can actually migrate through a leaky gut, through the blood, to the brain, and there are accumulations of alpha-synuclein in the brain of Parkinson's patients. And now it's thought that alpha-synuclein plays a role in the inflammatory conditions associated with Parkinson's disease. Quote, by the way, this is from the journal Molecular Medicine Reports 2021. Changes to the gastrointestinal microbiome cause misfolding and aggregation, abnormal aggregation of alpha-synuclein in the intestine. As you got messed up bacteria, that results in the accumulation of this protein alpha-synuclein. Now check this out. Abnormal alpha-synuclein is not eliminated, but rather is transported into the central nervous system via the vagus nerve. We talked about that last week. The abnormal levels of alpha-synuclein from the digestive system, from the intestine, aggregate in the substantia nigra, not only leading to the formation of inflammatory factors and immune factors, but also causing mitochondrial dysfunction in the dopamine neurons. You see what I'm saying here, people? You've got dysbiosis, you've got an accumulation of this protein alpha-synuclein. This alpha-synuclein is not eliminated, rather it goes into the bloodstream through a leaky gut and migrates its way to the central nervous system and finding its way in the brain. And now scientists believe, and medical researchers believe, that it's alpha-synuclein that may be responsible for the inflammation and the death of the neurons, the nerve cells in the substantia nigra. But what they're not telling you is the alpha-synuclein starts off in the intestine. Next slide. More on alpha-synuclein. This is from the journal Cell Death and Disease 2023. Abnormal forms of alpha-synuclein trigger progressive neuronal death through various factors in the brain, and are involved in neurodegenerative disorders such as dementia. Okay, there's also dementia aspect to this alpha-synuclein accumulation. And check this out. I love this. Multiple system atrophy. Literally, they call it multiple system atrophy. Alpha-synuclein in the blood can cause multiple system atrophy. What does that mean? That means everything. Multiple system atrophy means all the systems will deteriorate. Atrophy means it will deteriorate. So alpha-synuclein is not only associated with brain and nervous system disorders, dementia and Parkinson's disease, but also with multiple system atrophy. What more do you need to see, people? This is an intestinal connection to everything. Next slide. Gut microbiota, that's the microbiome, the bacteria in the intestine, a novel therapeutic target for Parkinson's disease. Now, cutting edge medical researchers are starting to target the microbiome for folks who have Parkinson's disease. You don't have to wait for cutting edge researchers to affirm what I've been telling you for 40 years. Just use common sense and logic. This is from Frontiers in Immunology. This is from 2022. Growing evidence has demonstrated that gut dysbiosis, messed up gut bacteria, is involved in the occurrence, development, and progression of Parkinson's disease. Numerous clinical trials have identified the characteristics of the changed gut microbiota profiles, and preclinical studies in Parkinson's disease animal models have indicated that gut dysbiosis can influence the progression and onset of Parkinson's disease. Next slide. Gut microbiome dysbiosis across early Parkinson's disease. Quote, we show gut microbiota compositions are significantly altered in Parkinson's disease. We show gut microbiota composition, Parkinson's disease like gut dysbiosis occurs at all stages of Parkinson's disease. Next slide. Now remember, we have a triangle here. So you've got a problem at the level of the gut, and you've got leaky gut and toxins getting into the gut. But there's also, it's a triangle, you've also got the blood sugar system that's involved. And if you've heard me talk about the triangle, this should come as no surprise to you. There's also a relationship between blood sugar or disruptions in blood sugar, what I call dysglycemia. Dysbiosis means messed up gut bacteria. Glycemia means messed up blood sugar. And the relation, this is from the International Journal of Neuroscience. It has been reported that 50 to 80% of patients with Parkinson's disease have abnormal glucose tolerance, which may be further exacerbated by levodopa therapy. That is, the drugs they give you for Parkinson's disease can make your dysglycemia worse. This is not uncommon, that the drugs that medical professionals dispense to patients can make the problems worse, even though they may offer some symptomatic relief. So it turns out that up to 80% of Parkinson's patients have messed up blood sugar, dysglycemia, and the levodopa that's given for Parkinson's disease can actually make dysglycemia worse. Next slide. Glucose metabolism impairment in Parkinson's disease is the second point in the triangle of disease. Impairment in systematic and regional glucose metabolism exist in patients with Parkinson's disease at every stage of the disease course, and such impairments are associated with the incidence, progression, and special types of Parkinson's disease. That's from Brain Research Bulletin. Next slide. Metabolic syndrome. I love that term, metabolic syndrome, because like multiple system atrophy, it implies that everything can go wrong when you have metabolic syndrome. Metabolic syndrome can affect the liver and it can affect the skin. Alzheimer's disease is thought to be part of metabolic syndrome. Kidney disease is thought to be part of metabolic syndrome. All manner of autoimmunity can be involved with metabolic syndrome, and no surprise, metabolic syndrome, which is dysglycemia and insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, is also involved with Parkinson's disease. A significant interaction between metabolic syndrome on the risk of incident Parkinson's disease was observed. Our population-based large-scale cohort study suggests that metabolic syndrome and its components may be risk factors of Parkinson's disease development. Again, you don't need to have these studies, but this just validates everything that we've been talking about for years, really, about the triangle of disease, about dirty blood, about the importance of digestive health when it comes to long-term chronic degenerative diseases. And of course, this is all important because this is all these causes of the nightmares of chronic degenerative diseases are in our control. They're lifestyle issues. And we'll talk about how you can address these things, but it all boils down to what we're eating. Not because I'm Mr. Organic guy, not because I'm Mr. Food guy, eat your vegetable guy. It's because this is how toxicity gets into the blood. And if you understand the relationship between blood toxicity and chronic degenerative diseases, all should make perfect sense. Next slide. Of course, we got the third point on the triangle of disease, which is the adrenal thyroid axis, or the adrenal thyroid complex, if you like. It turns out that there is an inflammatory and cortisol association between Parkinson's disease. No surprise, third point on the triangle of disease. Cortisol levels are significantly increased in Parkinson's disease, implying a dysregulation of GR. What is GR here? Let me see. What is GR? Of glucocorticoid release function in immune cells. That means that there is an involvement of the inflammatory and anti-inflammatory system. Cortisol is always going to be involved, and I didn't do any research on the thyroid, but hypothyroidism is also going to be involved. That's the third point on the triangle of disease. Parkinson's patients, via this cortisol connection and the blood sugar connection and the digestive connection, are likely going to be hypothyroid as well. I probably should have gotten some studies for that, but I'm sure there won't be it won't be hard to find those. So what do? Well, go to the next slide here. Work on food. First of all, always, whenever you're dealing with a chronic degenerative disease and you want to get some relief, or you want to slow down its progression, or you want to prevent its occurrence, and you have a digestive health challenge, and I said earlier that Parkinson's disease symptoms show up sometimes up to 10 years after constipation symptoms. So Parkinson's patients have long-standing digestive health issues. This is why a food diary is so important. So what you want to do, if you suspect that you're having a brain health issue, a movement disorder issue, and it's associated with some kind of digestive health issue, or if you just have an intestinal problem and you don't want to have Parkinson's disease or some other chronic degenerative disease show up, do a food diary and link specific foods to specific digestive symptoms. If you have Parkinson's disease, link those foods to tremors. Notice that when you eat certain foods, your tremors get worse. I was talking to a patient. A guy called me up a couple months ago He had no idea about this connection. I told him to do a food diary, and he said to me a couple weeks later, "Oh my gosh, every time I have bread, every time I have cereal, every time I have sugar, every time I have processed foods, my tremors get worse." Of course, he cut back on all these foods. He actually eliminated a lot of these foods, and his Parkinson's disease symptoms improved dramatically. And he had been going to doctors for years trying to deal with his Parkinson's symptoms. He was a young guy. So always do a food diary. Always practice the elimination diet, where you eliminate problem foods. Elimination diet simply means you stop eating the foods that cause either skin issues or tremor issues, Parkinson's issues, any kind of issues, bloating, gas, constipation, loose stools, whatever your symptoms are. They can be digestive, they can be neural, they can be immune, they can be skin. Always link them to the foods you're eating and then eliminate those foods. That's called the elimination diet. So food diary and elimination diet. Then there are wonderful supplements you could use. Of course, probiotics are going to be helpful. I love the Nightly Essence probiotics. Digestive enzymes can be helpful. I like the Ultimate Enzymes from Longevity. When you take your digestive enzymes, your Ultimate Enzymes, make sure that you're using a little apple cider vinegar or something acidic, maybe some aloe vera juice or lemon juice to activate the digestive enzymes. Digestive enzymes need to be activated by acid. You should also be using hyperimmune egg. Longevity's got a great product called I-26. All Parkinson's patients, as well as SIBO patients or patients who have any kind of health challenge associated with intestinal health, should be using I-26, which is egg powder that comes from eggs that have been laid by chickens who have been given an inoculation with an antigen. In response to that inoculation of the antigen, they make antibodies which show up in the eggs. Those antibodies can kill excess bacteria in the small intestine. As far as leaky gut goes, there's a couple wonderful strategies you can use. First of all, collagen peptides can strengthen a leaky gut. Longevity has a wonderful product called Fucoidan or Fucoid Z, which contains fucoidan. Fucoidan is a polysaccharide. It's a long sugar chain that's found in seaweed. It has a wonderful soothing effect on the mucosa of the intestine. That can be beneficial for folks who are dealing with leaky gut. And a really neat, not really a supplement, but something that you can use. You can buy it at the supermarket that can help strengthen and help repair a leaky gut, as well as soothe the inflammation that's associated with leaky gut, is gelatin. Either Knox gelatin, or if you like, you can use organic gelatin. Probably a good idea to use organic gelatin. You can also use Longevity's gel caps, which are in the Ultimate EFA. The Ultimate EFA comes in a gel cap. That gel cap itself can serve double duty. Not only does it carry and protect the essential fatty acid, but it can also be used, the gelatin in the gel cap can also be used by the body to help soothe inflammation. And of course, gelatin is collagen. That collagen can help repair, or the building blocks of that collagen may help repair leaky gut. Gelatin has been used for digestive health issues for really centuries. Since the Middle Ages, gelatin has been used for various digestive health issues. We know that gelatin can help repair leaky gut and has anti-inflammatory benefits for folks who are dealing with leaky gut syndrome, or if you prefer, intestinal permeability syndrome. Long story short, there's a ton you can do for Parkinson's disease yourself to prevent it. If you're dealing with a digestive health issue and you don't want to have Parkinson's disease, address your digestive condition now. Or if you have Parkinson's disease, or if you're starting to show some of the beginning signs of Parkinson's disease, you can backtrack to the digestive system, to leaky gut, doing your food diary, eliminating problem foods, working on metabolic syndrome, working on your dysglycemia and your blood sugar health by going ketogenic and reducing your calories, using supplements like the Sweeties from Longevity, or also niacin, the Ultimate Niacin from Longevity, Ultimate Selenium from Longevity. All of these have anti-diabetic properties. They may help you if you're dealing with Parkinson's disease. The third point of the triangle of disease, you can't really address that on its own, but by you're working on digestive health and working on blood sugar health, you can actually help lower cortisol levels, and that can be beneficial if you're dealing with Parkinson's disease. So there's lots you could do. You can't do it with a medical model. There's not much the doctor can do, but there's lots you can do by from the comfort of your own kitchen, basically, and perhaps bathroom as well. So lifestyle is always going to be our power. Our superpower is in our lifestyle choices. Chronic degenerative disease is an aberration. It should not occur. When it does, that means we just got to tweak a little bit. That means we're doing something wrong, and we just got to do a little bit of adjusting.
Outstanding. That was fantastic, man.
All right. Thank you.
Ben always brings the receipts. What's so exciting about these podcasts is, you know, when it comes to health, it's so difficult because you have the medical model and you have sources like Journal of American Medicine, right, JAMA, and the Lancet, and these institutional things that people always look for as the sort of standard of truth, in medicine. But what you bring is like this tidal wave, and it's so exciting because you see this information coming from all directions, and it really is what you're sort of displaying is not just the awesomeness of the information, the subject matter, but just how things are really changing,
I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. And yes, things are changing because people are waking up to the fact that really medicine isn't helping us. Now, I don't want this to be a knock, and I know I say this a lot, but I really have to say it often because it's important to me. This is not a knock on doctors. This is a knock on the paradigm, on the model that says that we can drug ourselves back to health. It doesn't really say that. It implies that. They never say that you can drug yourself back to health, but they imply. The commercials imply it. Healthcare professionals imply it. And there's this idea, this implication that, I can just take a drug and I'll be fine. It doesn't work that way. There are no drugs that can help us with chronic degenerative disease, but that doesn't matter because of all these wonderful lifestyle options that we have, especially when it comes to what we're eating.
Yeah, it's just so eye-opening to be doing these podcasts because it's not just one podcast. You bring it to the table every time. You just and so as you prepare for these podcasts, do you have like a sort of a daily ritual where you read through the week?
I have been I love reading. I love studies. People always ask me what kind of books they should read when they want to get involved with health. And I don't really read books. I read textbooks, but I don't really read popular books about health. I do a lot of reading, but they're not really popular books when it comes to health. It's mostly studies and textbooks. And I have a huge collection of research studies that I've just been waiting for a podcast that I could do, that I could really show these studies. And that's why I'm so happy to do these podcasts with you. And I'm so happy to have Restream where I can actually demonstrate these studies, because it's really important that people understand that this is in the literature. I'm not just making it up, even though there is logic. Like I said earlier, you don't really need literature because there's a lot of logic here. But when you see the literature, you're like, of course, it makes sense. And, you may get angry at the medical model for not telling you this, and it's unfortunate, but clinicians are not necessarily researchers. And the research is really where you learn how the disease starts, how it progresses, and what you can do about it. It's not in the clinical studies, or it's not in the clinical evidence, which really is about lowering markers, reducing symptoms. Clinical medicine is about making you feel better. Right. It's not really about solving the problem.
Symptom relief.
Symptom relief. And like I say, sometimes it's important to have symptom relief. If you have terrible tremors, you don't want to have the tremors. Sometimes Cinemat or levodopa or whatever you're taking can help. But if you really want to solve the problem, that's not a matter of clinical science. That's a matter of hardcore biological research, not even epidemiological research, not the kind of research where they ask people questions about what they ate and then connect what they ate to specific symptoms, and then do statistical algorithms to see what's the percentage of people who ate this food or had this lifestyle strategy, smoking or exercising or not exercising, then had symptoms. Those are called epidemiological studies. What I'm showing you here is not epidemiology, it's biological science. It's how the body's put together, or how toxicity accrues, or how toxicity aggregates in the blood and in the various tissues, including the brain. And that's really where you learn about how disease starts and how disease progresses and what you can do about it.
Yes, and like Ben says, everyone, keep a food diary.
Keep a food diary, so important. So important. I had a gal ask me, and I'm going to do another podcast here in about an hour. This gal who I do this podcast with said, "Can you explain how to do a food diary?" And, I thought that was an important question, but I didn't really know what to say, because it's just you write things down. And then you write down, it's not complicated. You write down everything you eat. And then next to it, you write down how you feel.
How you
From
feel.
a digestive system perspective, from a skin perspective, or if you're dealing with movement disorders or neurological issues, from a neurological perspective. And then you just connect the symptoms with specific foods and eliminate those foods.
So get your diaries together, people. Do some entries, and then come here on Sundays and tell us in the chats and in the comments what's up, and we'll be so happy to answer your questions. All right. Ben. Well, this has been another.
We'll see you next Sunday.
We'll see you next Sunday. All right, everybody. Put your questions or comments in the chats, and we'll see you next time. All right. Take care. Bye-bye.